I'm going to share a few slides in a minute, but I want to do a quick introduction to, how Lisa and I got to this particular framing of the situation at this moment. As she pointed out earlier, our work with transformational efforts with mostly large companies has been to sort of reorient people's consciousness about what's really going on in their company in connection to some massive disruption, be it from a new technology or a change in the markets or whatever. And the challenge is always to basically get a lot of people to see the world in a new way so that they can move into it and act from that new perspective. So with the whole climate conversation, we've basically run against an interesting challenge, right? Where things happen, speaking of BCG that you just mentioned, there was an event last week or so in Berlin between BCG and Edward Zenger, the German staffing company, Egor Zenger, something like that. And they had a facilitation, a moderator that says, how many of you think that we're going to be able to hold it within 1.5 degrees Celsius? There were 60 people in the room. How many do you think put up their hands? Zero, nobody, right? Then they went in and said, if we were to hold it to 1.5 degrees, we'd have to spend $150 trillion. Where do you think the conversation went? The conversation basically went, that's impossible. We don't have that. We can't do it. It's not doable. Now, that was the end of it, so to speak. The thing that's interesting to me is that, and Lisa as well, in our conversations, we kind of tried to figure out what's going on with this humanity, that we are talking about something like 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, who knows what, and we just move on. We don't say in that conversation with PCG, there wasn't a conversation that said, hey, hang on, folks. Let's take a look at what 1.5 degrees actually means. What does that mean? What is that? What is that world? We are at 1.2 degrees, and look what's going on in Greenland. Look at what's going on in the Antarctica. Look at what's going on, you name it, with all the tipping points that are being breached now. We are at the moment of breaching tipping points. There is no way we can slow down what's going on in Greenland. There's no way we can slow down what's going on, in Thwaites Glacier. But we're not addressing it. Like in every other realm of human behavior, of human response. Let's take, for example, the example of a house being on fire, right? We all know that we can trust our instincts. We know that even though I've never seen my house on fire, if that house is on fire, I will stop everything else. I will stop and say, what am I going to do? Is Lisa in there? Is my dog in there? Is anyone else in there? What else do I want to bring out? Can I still, whatever, right? Is it going to spread? Do I need to let what I'm saying is we have an instinctual capacity in the face of a disaster, in the face of an emergency, to step in a way we didn't know we could. And it means stopping what we're doing and then trusting our capacity to either know what we're going to do or connecting with others then as well to say, together, we're going to face this. And for some reason, when it comes to the most existential fact of life, of human life forever, we're incapable of doing that. We're continuing down the same track, right? We got electric cars in front of our house, 2 of them. We have electric panels on our roof. It doesn't make any difference. That's not the solution. The solution is much more radical that's required in the face of what we're actually facing, right? So does that make sense? That's sort of the background to what Lisa and I have challenged ourselves to say, how can we start to shift our thinking into a space where people start behaving in ways that we now must learn to behave? So with that as a background, I want to quickly share a basic framing of what we're playing with in terms of this idea in 3 weeks or so when we're going to do this session. And the main notion is that while all this stuff is going on, while we are getting all this information, 69% of animals, wild animals, have gone away in the last 50 years. Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on. We're supposed to reduce our emissions by 45% by 2030 in 8 years, and yet the UN lets us know that we're on a trajectory of plus 10.8%. That means by 2030, we're going to be 115% off target. It's catastrophic. So how is that possible? Because somehow we're holding on to the notion that we're still on this beautiful, familiar planet. Something is just not quite right. And what Lisa and I were thinking about is, in any other situation, if we find ourselves all of a sudden on a different planet, if we were to go to Mars, we would immediately say, how do we bring Mars back to this familiar thing? What is not right, right? We would basically say, oh, the air is not breathable. How do we make it breathable?
Or if we got there and it was almost could sustain life, but not quite.
And that's the idea with this idea of another planet, is to say, let's assume that we're finding ourselves on a new planet, that Earth as we now have it is actually not the planet we believe it is. It's not this planet. It is now looking like that. And we would say, if we just landed on it, we'd say, wow, this is a cool planet. It has the gravity of Earth. Wow, we can walk the same way we've always walked. The air is breathable. The water is drinkable. But hey, wait a minute. It's not, it's on a terrible trajectory. It's already at 420 parts per million of CO2. We need to get it back to below 300. The water has this much acidification in it. We need to change that. So that's the idea behind this concept of how would we start to think? Would we be able, if we sort of put this in front of ourselves, in front of a group of people, to say, let's rethink what planet we're really on and what that requires. So the idea is that if we need to take this planet and turn it into a hospitable planet again, how would we go about it, right? We just landed here, we look at it, we see it, and we'd say, hang on a second, it's getting hot. It's already too hot, it's getting hotter. We need to cool this thing. We don't know yet how, but that's number one. Number one is that we've got to cool this thing down because everything is melting. The methane is pouring out of the Arctic Circle because the permafrost is melting. The Greenland is melting, whatever. We've got to cool the place. That's number one priority. Because this emissions thing we talked about, I think that Brandon talked about that a little bit. It's not happening, right? We're saying we have to reduce it by 45% by 2030, and we're going up by 10.8%. It's not possible. And the reason why it's not possible is that we're living in the kind of society we live in. We're dependent on continuing to emit things. That Tesla that's sitting in front of my house, you can't even imagine what it took to get that aluminum body put together in terms of the energy that was put into that car, the batteries, the whatever. It's silly. As long as I drive, as long as I buy these things, they are going to emit things. So we got to do something different, right? We need to do what our colleague James just talked about, which means recovering these gases in whatever form it takes, right? We need to reconfigure the ecosystem. We need to think profoundly about ecosystem restoration, not some microscopic, let's tweak this or tweak that. We need to really put the kind of effort into it that's required. We need to revitalize the biodiversity. So fundamentally, we need to take responsibility for that, right? We need to step in and call bullshit on, the things we do that don't take us anywhere, and basically say the reality of our planet is this, right? That's the side on the left side. We need to move over to this other, and it means we have to go into a very different place. So what Lisa and I have been playing with as sort of background concepts is it's beyond the footprint, right? There's this thing about the idea of a footprint. We all need to understand what our footprint is. We need to reduce our footprint, but what is the handprint? What would it be like to take into our hands actively, again, what James is doing really in a very practical way, but for everyone to figure out what is my handprint where I can actively contribute to cooling, where I can actively contribute to biodiversity restoration, where I can actively contribute to the kind of things that are actually actively contributing to coming back to the earth that we have. And then to give that voice, right? To basically own this, to say, we are now moving into this new territory. So as an example, we played with this idea of what if everything we do would have to, this handprint idea would have to become an instrument for repair, an instrument for restoration. So you have a car, right now a car is basically the instrument for transport. What would the car look like if it were to be an instrument for repair? Or you have a ship, you have a container ship. How would a container ship become an instrument for repair? We've got tens of thousands of container ships crossing the oceans all the time. All they do is transport goods from China to America, to wherever, to Australia, but they're not viewed as instruments for repair, even though they're going through damaged water. They move through damaged atmosphere, through horrendously problematic realities right underneath their hull. So what if we had, we would rethink them. They have amazing computer systems on place. They have space on the thing. And we'd say for the CO2, let's have sensors on it. Let's have some kind of chemical catalysts on board that can interact with the CO2 in a way where it can do whatever. Methane, an incredible problem. They identify a methane leak. Again, how can we sense that? It deploys something to start interacting with that. Phosphorus, nitrogen, you name it, the water health, the health of the plastics in the ocean. How about we have little robots that as the ship goes through and it sees an abandoned net, it just picks it up and puts it away. We're just playing here at, with some kind of a background to an exercise that then we could say in this session in 3 weeks. So how would we engage the group into a conversation where they start to think about, what is it we could do to establish our regenerative handprint? What are the kind of environments within which we function? What are the problems that those environments have, and how can we interact with that? And then
I think we should put up some examples. We give examples both of kind of the disasters and the climate emergency, but we give examples of solutions. So it could be really interesting for us to look at biocare projects and see about that as an example that we might put up. There might be other examples that you guys know about. There's some that we've traditionally used, but in the same way that every week the things are with climate. And so what the current crisis is, we tend to update our slides based on what it is that's emerging, that particular week. So, we can look and see. And so, James, if it's okay with you, we might, maybe if there's a slide you want us to put up or has a couple of things
as an example of
I actually think that's one of the more compelling examples I've heard. And so we'd be happy to put that in. Is like, we just like to give some examples that show people, that stretch their thinking, to show them what the possibilities are.
Well, it's a great example, the James example. So you're a sugarcane plantation. You just you used to just put that stuff on and you just let the methane just, go up. No, but with James's help, you can change your handprint, right? You can actively engage James, say from now on out, that sugarcane is going to become biochar. That's what we're talking about. Right?
These prints, we actually will show a picture of too, is what's the blueprint? How do you make the blueprint for what you're going to do? How do you get your strategy and your first steps and who you're going to engage and who's going to create this blueprint together for how to do this, for handling your footprint and your handprints and your voice.
All right. So now you're sort of seeing where Lisa's and my thinking is at the moment around this activity, this potential activity. What do you think? Any responses? Are we completely off the beam, or what's your thinking?